Disney's live-action Snow White was supposed to be a daring reimagining of a timeless classic, but it swiftly descended into chaos due to backlash against the Seven Dwarfs being replaced with a diverse band, and Rachel Zegler's harsh remarks about Trump supporters. As expenses skyrocketed, it seemed like everything about this movie sparked outrage and supporters turned away. Disney had no option but to completely scrap the project. Disney was the first Disney prince of such a date with just the show, and if he would have been decidedly too difficult, how did a tale of wonder and magic turn into one of the most contentious periods in Disney's history? Who is the fairest of all, according to the magic mirror on the wall? It was obvious that Disney was taking a daring, if not dangerous move, when they revealed Rachel Zegler as the star of their live-action White remake. Zegler is renowned for her candor. For a position so strongly associated with tradition and nostalgia, opinions and a willingness to stir things up weren't exactly the best options. Fans were split as soon as the casting announcement was made. While some were intrigued, a sizable portion of Disney's devoted following was left perplexed. You see, the first cartoon was released in 1937 and is pretty obvious. As a result, a lot of attention is on her romantic history with an oddball man who stalks her. It's strange that I didn't do that this time. Zegler's public criticism of the original Snow White, a movie that essentially established Disney's empire, as being out of date and irrelevant, calling the princess a creepy stalker and asserting that women today don't yearn for the kind of romance the original story portrayed for many, didn't help her case in interviews. It seemed as though she wasn't just dismissing the film's themes, but also disrespecting a piece of cinematic history. Imagine being given the keys to an iconic role and instead of honoring it, you destroy it. When Peter Dinklage said what he said last year, it was taken away. As if that weren't enough, the controversy grew when Disney decided to replace the Seven Dwarfs. Fans of the classic movie were understandably upset because there are actors and dwarf actors who live their dreams of being in a major motion picture like this Disney remake with what they refer to as the diverse band of magical creatures. And as you know, the controversy began Seven Dwarfs landing on the island. The decision, which was allegedly prompted by remarks made by actor Peter Dinklage, infuriated dwarfs who felt that it was a lost chance for representation in a major motion picture. Longtime Snow White fans were also perplexed by the original Seven Dwarfs were essential to the plot by taking their place. They weren't merely supporting characters. These six dwarf actors who would have anticipated roles in this remake in a huge Hollywood blockbuster are now not going to have that experience, all the money, all the fame that may have come with that. And the people who, in my opinion, have really suffered in all of this, they're not getting the recognition that they deserve, which I say is terrible in a couple ways. I think the fake post-credit scenes are problematic in one way, but in other ways I think are great because they don't highlight these dwarfs. So it's a new time on a planet. It's something extremely unexpected, but maybe one of the better ways. Disney seemed to be rewriting the essence of what made Snow White timeless. This remake became a symbol of Hollywood's overzealous attempt to be politically correct, and although the polarizing casting could have been a progressive move, it felt forced and disconnected. The backlash was immediate and loud. Fans took to social media to accuse Disney of digressing and losing touch with its audience instead of celebrating the beloved fairy tale. Disney seemed to have forgotten from the beginning of the story that people watch Snow White for the magic, not for social commentary, charm, and the quote about nostalgia. The left still fails to provide us with a new way forward. This defeat shouldn't have happened, and it shouldn't have happened by such a large number of votes. May there never be peace for Trump's followers, voters, and himself. When Rachel Zegler's remarks about Donald Trump and his supporters went viral, she didn't hold back from calling Trump supporters pathetic disappointments and wishing that they never know peace for a public figure, especially one leading a major Disney project. Rachel Zegler is more than just an actress. She isn't afraid to voice her opinions, no matter how controversial that outspokenness takes center stage. Telling Rachel Zegler to behave normally, apparently, isn't an option either. But this kind of statement was like throwing gasoline on an open fire. Zegler had a very public outburst the other day in response to the presidential election. She insulted the 75 million Americans who voted for Donald Trump by writing, quote, "Foo Donald Trump" in her Instagram stories. During these 4 more years of hatred, I am at a loss for words. The backlash was swift and pointed us in the direction of a world I don't want to live in, and fervent social media erupted in responses, primarily from Trump backers, who were personally insulted. Many of them pledged to boycott her next movie, saying they wouldn't part with their cash to support someone who openly disregarded a significant portion of the nation. The tone, brimming with contempt, was what sparked the outrage, not just the comments per se. That made a lot of people feel offended. The message Zegler sent for a film that required widespread appeal to succeed was more than just politics. Her remarks turned off a significant number of potential viewers. They weren't only criticizing her political views, they were also wondering why Disney, a company known for its family-friendly image, would remain silent in the face of such divisive behavior, and the silence only made matters worse. How upon Disney's attitude really came about, given the already star-crushes culture that only grew blatantly within the company. Both political factions started attacking Disney, one for failing to denounce her remarks, and the other for not publicly endorsing her. Well, they have their reasons, and it seems that Donald Trump is solely to blame. Take a look at the official trailer for Disney's Snow White, which has been widely criticized for being woke. Let's just take a look at the trailer that further complicates the situation. Zegler threw herself into the controversy, turning the Snow White project into a battlefield for political and cultural arguments. Fans who may have been unsure about the remake had yet another reason to leave, and she did so later. The political atmosphere was already charged with Trump's recent election and dominating headlines. I apologize for her remarks, but this isn't the best marketing strategy. It's ahead of this movie. Putting out your top actress to go ahead and offend half of America and possibly causing a huge backlash is a great strategy, but it wasn't just her words. People began to wonder about the bigger picture of accountability. Why was another Disney actress, Gina Gano, fired for making political remarks that many deemed less provocative than Zegler's? The double standard was evident to everyone until the idea that Disney had lost its way. The Queen, was Zegler still in a role despite remarks that offended millions of people? What are you interested in knowing? Tell me, if Disney regrets anything, it's the amount of money they spent on the Snow White live-action remake. There have been numerous setbacks in this project, and each time it seemed like things couldn't get any worse, they did. A straightforward reimagining of a classic turned into a financial and PR catastrophe. She is dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader her late father told her she could be if she was fearless, not about being safe with the prince or dreaming of true love. Fair, brave, and true. The fan backlash was the first major problem. Disney attempted to correct the situation with a reshoot after people expressed dissatisfaction with the casting changes, but reshoots are never inexpensive. In this instance, they reportedly cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Consider this. Hundreds of millions of dollars were spent solely to save a film that already made fans nervous, and despite all of that money, nothing seemed to change. Instead of the enchanted fairy tale they adored, fans who watched leaked clips online were unimpressed. The movie seemed to concentrate on a hyper-modernized version of the story, which some dubbed a feminist fever dream. It seemed as though Disney was completely rewriting the story rather than merely reinterpreting it. So in the end, most of the film's documentation was left out than even made it into the film, and it seemed as though Disney was completely rewriting the story rather than merely reinterpreting it. Additionally, the release date kept getting pushed back due to the delays. Every delay, including the most recent one that moved the movie to 2025, was accompanied by more negative publicity and increased skepticism. Plus, people began to question whether Disney had any idea what it was doing with this movie, because it doesn't exactly exude confidence when a project keeps getting delayed. It got worse because the criticism was no longer limited to the casting or the movie's concept. It also focused on the production itself, with the budget skyrocketing to absurd levels. Fans even joked that Disney would have been better off scrapping the project entirely rather than investing more money in something so divisive. To top it all off, the frequent leaks only served to fuel the flames. So, fans wanted the magic and nostalgia that made the original a classic, not a contemporary political spin on the tale, and brief snippets and information about the film's new direction gave the impression that the film had deviated from the original so much that it hardly felt like Snow White anymore. At last, Disney decided to discontinue it. live action. After months of growing criticism, never-ending disputes, and a soaring budget, the Snow White project felt, quite honestly, like an inevitable step. There was simply no way to save what had turned into a sinking ship. One major factor was Rachel Zegler's polarizing public persona. In this decision, however, the problems went far beyond a single actress who must wear the dress for every hour. I mean, it's like biting the hand that feeds you. Not only are you being cast in a remake of a classic movie, but you also don't seem to like your own role. Not only was the criticism of Snow White loud, but it was unrelenting. The literally comic description of Snow White writing was that, in quotes, a huge eyebrow raised one woman. In Damnation, the labeling of Snow White I really don't see as having a very similar ending to the movie. But as you'll hear, I do personally think the film set fans were incensed about the story's revisions, the removal of the seven dwarfs, and Zegler's contempt for the first movie. The actress's public remarks, particularly her caustic remarks about Trump supporters, only served to fuel the flames. With such widespread criticism, Disney was in a precarious situation. The project was a financial failure, and how do you market a movie when so many people have already vowed not to see it? Reshoots and delays caused the budget to soar, with expenses reaching the hundreds of millions for a movie that was already having trouble creating favorable buzz. It was difficult to defend those kinds of expenditures. In addition, Disney couldn't afford another high-profile failure after a run of poor movies. While canceling Snow White may have been a difficult choice, it was probably the only one. Fans were further irritated by the obvious double standard, which was highlighted by many when they pointed out that Disney promptly dismissed Gina Gano due to her political beliefs, while supporting Zegler for much more offensive remarks. Fans didn't like this discrepancy until the backlash got so bad that the studio finally took action. They saw it as yet another instance of Disney putting politics ahead of justice and good storytelling. For Disney, Snow White turned into a cautionary tale. The endeavor wasn't merely a failure, it represented everything. In recent years, fans have criticized the company for hiring divisive personalities who alienate audiences and for putting woke messaging ahead of sticking to beloved stories. It was difficult to overlook Disney's errors with this movie. Snow White fiasco has damaged Disney's reputation once more, and it's not just about 1FM. There is a larger issue that has been simmering for years. After decades of Disney's struggle to strike a balance between upholding traditional values and the stories that created its empire, fans are beginning to question whether the company even knows who its audience is anymore. When it came to classic storytelling, Disney was the preferred brand. People grew up with its songs, characters, and magic, but there has been a noticeable change in recent years. The emphasis has shifted from telling enduringly popular stories to promoting ideas that frequently come across as lectures rather than amusement. The classic fairy tale Snow White became the ideal illustration of this. It was not merely updated, but completely transformed in a manner that alienated those who valued it the most. Longtime fans felt deceived by Disney's preference for political correctness over maintaining the magic that made its story unique, so the backlash wasn't shocking. It's not that audiences dislike change, they just want it to make sense. People notice when a story is stripped of its essence in order to follow a trend. Additionally, they begin to lose faith. This is also not an isolated incident. Fight is the latest in a string of scandals that have damaged Disney's once untouchable reputation, ranging from unpopular remakes to claims of unfair treatment, such as that between Gina Carano and Rachel Zegler. Disney continues to make headlines for all the wrong reasons. Every blunder drives away more fans, putting the business in a difficult position. The long-term harm to Disney's brand, which was once known as family-friendly, is the true risk here, not just the loss of one project or the disappointment of a few fans. Feel-good entertainment is beginning to seem disconnected from the people who helped make it popular. And audiences will start searching elsewhere if they can no longer rely on Disney to provide the stories they enjoy. For Disney, this is not the end. Although it's too big to fall apart all at once, Disney should take note of the Snow White mess if it hopes to preserve its reputation and its followers. People want to laugh, cry, and lose themselves in a world of wonder, not divisive politics. So it needs to refocus, as they have always done. Whether Disney can find its way is the question, back before it permanently loses its magic. So please share your thoughts in the comment section below.